And welcome back to the Morning Docket with Jesse Weber. Jesse is in the courthouse now, waiting the beginning of the Harvey Weinstein trial. This is Brian Ross in today for Jesse. And outside the courthouse is our own Angelica Spanos. Angelica, good morning to you. It looks cold there.
Hey there, Brian. It is a bit chilly here this morning, especially standing outside as we just saw Harvey Weinstein walk up the front steps of this courthouse moments ago. His opening statements of his trial expected to begin any minute now at 9:30 this morning. Now, before all of this, of course, the past 2 weeks have been spent picking the jury, those 12 jurors that will decide Weinstein's fate here. They also entered this courtroom this morning to get this trial underway. And this is surely going to be the beginning of a contentious 2 months here. We're going to expect to see some witness testimony, plenty of cross-examination, and of course, legal argumentation. Now, the beef of this trial will get underway today. And what we know so far is that the crux of the defense's case here is that the sexual relationships between Weinstein and the accusers, they are going to say that that was consensual. We know that Weinstein's defense team is allowed to present a series of email exchanges that he had with his accusers. His team says this will prove affectionate relationships between them and that they all happened before the allegations. The contents of the email will be key for his defense and could illustrate that the encounters with the women who say he forced them into sexual acts were actually consensual. Meantime, as for the prosecution, they must demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt that Weinstein is guilty. To do so, we're expecting testimony from witnesses to argue that Weinstein engaged in a pattern of predatory behavior. The prosecution will also likely rely on expert testimony about how victims of sexual assault handle and interact with their abusers in the aftermath. Now, Weinstein pleaded not guilty to charges of assaulting 2 women in New York. Mimi Halle, one of those women, back in 2006. She's represented by Gloria Allred here. And the second accuser says he raped her at a Manhattan hotel in 2013. She is unnamed right now at this time. He faces up to life in prison if convicted on the top counts of predatory sexual assault. Now, I want to mention that one of the things we didn't see out here today were those protesters that we saw at the beginning and the start of this trial. We had seen a large crowd of females representing the Me Too movement here, speaking about victims of sexual assault. They are not here today, so that is one thing I wanted to point out to you. And also, late yesterday, the court denied the defense's motion, Harvey Weinstein's motion, to move this trial from downtown Manhattan. That is not happening. As you can see, the large media presence behind me, that was one of his reasonings, that he said he would not be able to get a fair trial here. Well, that's not happening, and as you can see, the media is still here in full force. We're live in Manhattan. Angelica Spanos, back over to you.
Thanks, Angelica. It's a big crowd there. Who is there? Are there other women who have alleged that Weinstein abused them, attacked them?
We haven't seen much of that yet, to be honest. We've seen, I saw Gloria Allred walk into the court, obviously, as she is here for her defendant, her client. We haven't seen much of a crowd outside of this room, the courtroom. Mostly everyone here is media here to cover this trial.
It's extensive coverage. There was a big dust-up over whether Gloria Allred would be allowed inside the courtroom because she could be called as a witness. Is that right?
Yes, that is true, and I did, as I said, saw her walk in here today, so assumingly she will be allowed inside that courtroom. Once the opening statements get underway at about 9:30, hopefully we'll be able to get some more idea of what's going on inside, because as you mentioned, Jesse Weber, he is in the courtroom right now.
And as I understand it, to be inside the courtroom, you have to line up about 5 in the morning to get in line. It's not that big of a courtroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And luckily enough, we had a producer willing to get in that line at 5:30 this morning. She got in line, waited for a long time to get that spot. And of course, luckily, thanks to her, we are now able to have Jesse inside the courtroom to report what is going on in there, because as you said, it is small in there. They are tight quarters and they are limiting how much media can get in that courtroom.
The judge in this case, James Burke, has denied virtually every defense motion. He wouldn't move the trial. He didn't want to step down, didn't want to recuse himself. What kind of a judge is he? What do we know about him?
From what we've heard, we know that he is a longtime judge here. He stands his ground. He's very passionate about a lot of these things and is really looking to the law here for a lot of his rulings. As you said, this was the second time that Weinstein's defense said, hey, let's get this trial moved out of Manhattan. The first time, which I think was back in October, that was also denied. And again, yesterday, late afternoon, the second motion was denied. They asked for the trial to be moved up to Albany or out to Long Island. Obviously has to stay here in New York still, but he said no both of those times. Now, Weinstein's defense saying he wouldn't be able to get a fair trial here because of all this media coverage, the circus that has surrounded this trial, but the judge standing his ground and saying absolutely not. The trial will go on here at this location.
Okay, Angelica Spanos, thank you so much. We'll check back in with you in about a half hour or so. Continue to do your great reporting out there. Angelica Spanos from the Law and Crime Network, and Jesse Weber is inside the courthouse, so we'll have all the details as they become available. But we're going to be beginning now with our coverage of the Harvey Weinstein trial. Mr. Weinstein arrived a short while ago, going into the courthouse. We saw Gloria Allred, and outside the courthouse is Law and Crime Network's Angelica Spanos. Angelica, it's all yours.
Hey there, Brian. Good morning to you. Yeah, just after 9 o'clock this morning, we saw Weinstein walk into the front of the courthouse behind me here. Today, though, he didn't use his walker. One of his aides had it next to him. He was carrying it for him, but he himself did not use it today. That, of course, is what we've seen him use in his recent court appearances. Now, this is sure to be the beginning of a very eventful 2 months here. That's how long we're expecting this trial to go for. The beef of this trial beginning today with those opening statements, which are expected to begin at 9:30 this morning. Now, we know that the 12-person jury that just took the past 2 weeks to gather and choose is inside that courtroom at well. That jury made up of 7 men and 5 women. As for the opening statements and what can we expect, let me walk you through this here. We know that the crux of the defense's case is that the sexual relationships between Weinstein and the accusers were consensual. They say that Weinstein's defense team is going to present a series of email exchanges that he had with his accusers. His team says this will prove affectionate relationships between them and that these all happened before the allegations. Now, the contents of those emails will be key here for his defense. They could illustrate that the encounters with the women who say he forced them into sexual acts were actually consensual. Meantime, talking about the prosecution, they must demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt that Weinstein is guilty. And in order to do so, we're expecting testimony from witnesses to argue that Weinstein engaged in a pattern of predatory sexual behavior. The prosecution will also likely rely on expert testimony about how victims of sexual assault handle and interact with their abusers in the aftermath. We also know that pictures of famous actresses as well as testifying witnesses will be shown to the jurors during these opening statements. Weinstein pleaded not guilty to charges of assaulting 2 women in New York, one in 2006, Mimi Haley, who is represented by Gloria Allred, as well as another one back in 2013, who says that Weinstein raped her in a Manhattan hotel. Now, he faces up to life in prison if convicted of the top counts of predatory sexual assault. I also want to mention out here live today, we are not seeing that large presence of protesters that we saw in the beginning of this trial. We saw many people and women, members of the Me Too movement here with signs protesting this whole thing and, of course, trying to stand here and be the voices for victims of any sexual assault. That large gathering is not out here today, so that's interesting to note.
Angelica, there will be other women who will testify about attacks that Harvey Weinstein conducted on them, they allege. What's the point of that testimony?
Right, that's right. We are expecting to hear other accusers testify and speak here in this trial. That is going to be big testimony, and of course, we're going to be watching that carefully, not only for what they say, but also for the cross-examination, because that testimony will, hopefully prove that Weinstein has had this history of bad behavior. But as the defense is hoping, they hope that they'll be able to undermine the credibility of those women that testify, and they're hoping to do that in the cross-examination.
This is a man who was so powerful in Hollywood. Are any of his Hollywood friends showing up? Is he getting support from anybody who he used to work with?
We haven't seen many people that we know of here to support Harvey other than his team and all of his lawyers. But, it'll be interesting to see who appears throughout this trial, because this is just really the first day of the opening statement. So as this is going to go on for the next couple months, I'm sure we will see appearances from people supporting Harvey going forward.
And the judge has indicated it will be several months. That's how long this trial will go on?
Right. We are expecting this to last for the next couple months, which is going to make this a very long trial. Of course, the media coverage of it will be very extensive, as we are seeing that already, and we have seen that so far. One of the things that Harvey's defense they asked for a motion for this trial to be moved out of downtown Manhattan here, because they said that he cannot get a fair trial here because of just how much media coverage this trial is garnering. Well, the motion for that was denied late yesterday afternoon, so the trial will go on right here in downtown Manhattan. Originally, they had asked for it to be moved up to Albany or out to Long Island. That is not going to be the case, and as you can see behind me here, there is a lot of media presence here, and that is how it's been really since day one when the jury selection process began.
Angelica Spanos at the Manhattan Courthouse, thank you so much. We'll check back with you in about an hour. Keep us posted on any developments there in this trial that is such a high-profile trial, with so many people paying attention to the fall of this once powerful Hollywood figure. Angelica, thank you very much.